reported an 83% increase overall, with a full 59% of it as classified anti-Semitic incidents. Authorities received a total of 176 complaints in the first 5 months of 2019 alone. The latest incident took place on August 29th. A 34-year-old Hasidic man was struck by a brick through the window of his truck in Brooklyn. Just 2 days earlier, a 63-year-old rabbi became a victim in a similar incident in Crown Heights. These are not isolated cases. On August 12th, 3 Jews were attacked in 3 separate incidents within the span of 1 hour in Williamsburg. Personally, hitting closer to home, just 2 Shabbats ago, a man walking in the street wearing a yarmulke was beaten with a leather belt as he was walking just a few blocks away from the house in Midwood where my husband and I raised our 6 children. Swastikas and anti-Jewish messages have also been spray painted around Brooklyn and throughout New York City, including a playground and on a poster of Jewish Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. College campuses aren't any better, with pro-BDS and anti-Israel apartheid rallies, bullying by anti-Semitic professors, being cut out of college social clubs, and a genuine fear of just walking across the campus and being physically attacked. How will our children protect themselves when they are away at school? How can we as parents, what can we do to educate and protect our children before they even get there? Good evening, my name is Rebecca Harari, and on behalf of the Bnai Zion Foundation, I would like to welcome you all here tonight to discuss the roots and causes, as well as some approaches to solving the antagonizing issue of anti-Semitism. At Bnai Zion, we've taken the approach that fighting anti-Semitism begins with constructive behavior. And when I say constructive, well, that's what we do. Over the last 111 years, Bnai Zion has built and supported over 100 capital and humanitarian projects exclusively in Israel. Our projects include the Bnai Zion Medical Center in Haifa, where we are currently building an underground, bomb-proof and chemical warfare-proof emergency room, since it is situated on the borders of both Syria and Lebanon. We're also building an extension to the Yuvalim Center in Ma'ale Adumim, which will be able to accommodate hundreds more senior citizens, many of which are Holocaust survivors. The Ahava Village for Traumatized Youth, which houses 250 Israeli kids whose lives have been deeply affected by violence and terror, is another project on the top of our list. And the David Yellen Teachers College in Israel is where we have sponsored a curriculum that includes helping Arab students understand the teachings of the Torah, and likewise for Jewish students to understand the Quran. You can read more about us in the Voice magazine that you've all seen on your seats. And that magazine is our most current issue, and it's dedicated entirely to anti-Semitism. In short, anti-Semitism is the enemy, and in Israel, Bnai Zion constantly works to defeat it by being a role model for diversity, inclusivity, and tolerance. As a Jewish organization, we are there for anyone in Israel who needs our help through the building of capital and humanitarian projects. Tonight, we are here to discuss the alarming rise in anti-Semitism and how all of us can find solutions to combat it and break it down. First, and in behalf of Bnai Zion, I would like to thank Rabbi Chaim Steinmetz for once again welcoming Bnai Zion into his beautiful synagogue and for encouraging us to keep fighting the fight against this most debilitating and offensive rise in autism and anti-Semitism. Thank you. I would also like to recognize Cheryl Beer, our Executive Director, our Chief Executive Officer, and the Bnai Zion board members, Don Vogelman and Cheryl Safran. I would also like to recognize the Executive Director of the AZM, Herbert Block, is here. I can see you somewhere. like to give a special thanks to Dr. Naomi Vilko for all of her support, and to Debbie Honig of the Orthodox Jewish Chamber of Commerce for standing with us to bring you this event tonight. So with us tonight, we have 5 brilliant leaders and scholars in the Jewish world. And truly, they need no introduction, but of course I'm going to introduce them anyway. Beginning with our panelists, our president, Bnai Zion's president, Steve Savitsky, is here. As you know, KJ's senior, Rabbi Chaim Steinmetz, is here. U.S. Special Envoy for Anti-Semitism Elan Carr, straight from Washington, is here. And best-selling author and professor at Emory University, Deborah Lipstadt, is here. As you can see, this is not Brooke Goldstein in the center. Unfortunately, she is quite ill and really sent her apologies. She just could not make it tonight. She felt really, really bad. But when she called me, I knew there was only one person that could do the job and to do it right. And that's our very own Rabbi Eli Abadi. Just a few words about Eli Abadi, Rabbi Eli Abadi, because he's not mentioned in your little program. So I thought I'd just give you a quick synopsis for those of you who may not know his extensive background. Rabbi Abadi comes from a long line of rabbis dating back to the 15th century Spain and Provence. He was born in Beirut, Lebanon, and raised in Mexico City, coming to the United States to study at Yeshiva University. Rabbi Abadi was the founder and rabbi of the Edmund J. Suffer Synagogue and the founder and rabbi of the Manhattan East Synagogue. He speaks fluent English, Spanish, Hebrew, Arabic, and French, and lectures on Sephardic Judaism, also on history, philosophy, law, and medical ethics. Following in the footsteps of the great Moses Maimonides, Rabbi Abadi is both a rabbi and physician and maintains his practice in gastroenterology while being a spiritual leader to many around the globe. We are truly, truly lucky to have you here. Well, I guess that's all I have to say. So, Rabbi Abadi, take it away.
Thank you, Rebecca, very much. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I want to thank Bnai Zion for this opportunity to have this panel discussion on anti-Semitism by such great panelists that we have, leaders in their field. As Rebecca said, I am not Brooke Goldstein, and I'm not a transgender trying to look like her either. So I hope we will do justice to her tonight as she's not here, and we wish her a speedy recovery. So the program is going to be the following way. We're going to have approximately 45 minutes of discussion. We're going to pose 3 questions. There will be an opening remark, which is the first question. We'll give each panelist a 3-minute per remark, and then the subsequent questions will be for 2 minutes each. At the end, we will have approximately 15 minutes open to public questions, and we would like you to pass those questions to Rebecca so we could read them here as we make those questions. I am sure we will not be able to read all of them, but we'll try our best to accommodate as many as we can. And so let us start. As an opening remark, we'll start with Deborah Lipstadt, but the question is, or the opening remark is, from your vantage point, from the position that you occupy, how do you see the state of affair of anti-Semitism in the United States and the world?
Okay. There we go. Okay. Give it a second. There we go. In 3 minutes or less. I wrote a whole book on it, so I can just say C under anti-Semitism here and now. Actually, I'm not sure if there are more anti-Semites today or the anti-Semites feel more emboldened, freer to say and do what they want. I think it's a little bit of, it's a lot of anti-Semites feeling emboldened, and I think there are more people willing, expressing it today. I see 4 sources of anti-Semitism. The left, BDS, and various and sundry other things like that. The right, white supremacists, white nationalists, and people who aren't going around shooting people, but who are expressing it quite clearly. Go to any white nationalist, white supremacist, far right-wing website, and you will see it there. And if you don't take it seriously, you're making a big mistake. Islamist extremists, clearly in Europe, that's where the violence has come from, as opposed to in this country where it's come from the white nationalists and white supremacists. And from, and I want to be very careful here because I don't want to do the same thing that we're decrying, engage in sweeping prejudice, from sectors, particularly, you see this particularly in Europe, sectors of the mainstream Muslim community, not all Muslims, but sectors of the mainstream Muslim community who are inculcated with anti-Semitism, with just a dislike of Jews, often filtered through a dislike of Israel. So those are the 4 sources. We've had them from those sources before, but never have we seen it in such confluence, all simultaneously. That's one thing. I think what I'm going to turn it around and how we might respond. I think it's extremely important that we approach this topic with nuance. We are all angry, we are scared, we are concerned, we are worried. When you're angry, concerned, worried, you often lash out. Think about fights you've been in with a member of your family or someone else, you often lash out. This is a war, and we have to fight it strategically. Someone may say something we disagree with, something we dislike tremendously about Israel, about Jews, whatever it might be. We've got to be careful in branding it anti-Semitism, making sure it is anti-Semitism. Because when I say someone is an anti-Semite, that's a big thing. I don't want to cheapen the charge by throwing it out too often and throwing it out too glibly, which I think some of us do, sometimes thoughtlessly. And finally, and the last point I want to make, because I know I'll have more time later, is I'm very concerned about not what the anti-Semites will do to us, but what we will do to ourselves because of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is serious. Most of us really haven't encountered it. You can walk around a 40-block area around the synagogue with your yarmulke, with tzitzis hanging out, with a bag that says Israel, I support Israel, whatever, and not have a problem. Let's not say that Jews can't walk down the street. Let's not overstate it. I think it's a problem. I wouldn't have spent 3 years of my life writing a book if I didn't think it was a problem. But again, to see it in perspective. But what I'm afraid of is that with our focus on anti-Semitism, we will do that to the exclusion of the positive. It's a focus on the oi as opposed to the joy. And that by doing that, we turn Jew into object. What is done to Jews as opposed to what Jews do. So that we have to be very careful from making, look, I'm spending most of my time now traveling around the world talking about this subject, writing about this subject, so know where I'm coming from. But at the same time, we have to keep focused on the positive, the many good things, the many things we have accomplished, and try to find that balance.
Thank you. Obviously, anti-Semitism is nothing new. It's not a new disease. It's not a new scourge. As we read in the Haggadah every year, in every generation, they rise against us to annihilate us.
Second half to that.
That's correct. Of course, in a sense, long term, I'm not worried about anti-Semitism, but we have had it in every generation, and certainly I don't think that they had panels like this 100 years ago or 200 years ago, maybe only in the last 50 years. We have had panels and the courage to discuss it, but it's something very, very old. So Elan, as the long-awaited, newly appointed not so new already now, several months, right? 6 months or so. Monitor, Envoy, ambassador to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. What have you seen so far on your position from that office on anti-Semitism?
So, first of all, I don't think the issue and the problem could possibly have been encapsulated better than the way Deborah just did. You have these three sources. I call them three, you call them four, but really two of them are both Islamic related. Think about it. These are three disparate sources: the ethnic supremacist far right, the Israel-hating radical left, and militant Islam, that should hate each other more than they hate anything else on earth. You can't imagine more divergent ideological worldviews, and yet they're united by their hatred of Jews. And I would argue, by the way, united also by something else, and that is the fundamental incompatibility of their values with everything on which the United States and many good, decent countries in the world are built. And so, first of all, it's important to remember that the fight against anti-Semitism, this great fight of our age, isn't only about protecting Jews. Although if it were, I would say that would be moral reason enough to spare no effort in fighting that fight. To protect the most persecuted minority in history, that's reason enough to do it. But it's not. It's not. The fight against anti-Semitism is really the fight for our societies, for our countries, plural, because I deal with this globally, and for the kind of world we want our kids to inherit. Anti-Semitism really is human history's greatest barometer of suffering. And President Trump, at every opportunity, calls it the vile poison of anti-Semitism. It's the term he uses. It's a very apt description because it really is a poison. Every society that has imbibed this poison has rotted to its core and produced human misery at a level that defies description. And so, really, this cause is a cause that all good, decent-minded people should join together to take up. Now, here's some good news. And I agree that even though it is on the rise, America still remains the most philo-Semitic country in the history of the world. There are problems, many problems. I spoke at Laura Kay's funeral at Poway, and it was heart-wrenching that a Jew should be murdered on Shabbat in synagogue because she's Jewish, 6 months to the day after more were murdered in Pittsburgh. Heart-wrenching. I was just this morning in Lakewood dealing with unvarnished, open anti-Semitism expressed on websites, including that gassing Jews and plotting to kill Jews in Lakewood, in New Jersey. So we have our problems, we have our issues. But America is and has been the most philo-Semitic country in the history of the world. That's piece of good news number one. Piece of good news number two is that in my role as our country's diplomat on this issue, I can tell you that we have many friends and allies around the world who get it, really get it. And if there's one thing about my job that's been a delightful surprise, and I would say really a surprise, it's the extent to which non-Jewish leaders at all levels, by the way, including prime ministers, some prime ministers, ministers, parliamentarians, down to local mayors and coordinators, who are as passionate and eloquent about this issue as you can imagine. They stand up and they with incredible passion, talk about how this is the fight of our generation, how we must win this for the sake of our kids. And that the fate of Europe, if it's Europe we're talking about, the fate of Europe rides on winning this fight. Now, if there weren't people like that, I'd be worried. But this really isn't the 1930s. As bad as this is, it is in the 1930s because we have friends and allies in powerful places around the world who are incredibly good partners. Let me just highlight one of them. John Mann of the Labour Party in the UK, formerly the Labour Party. He just walked out and excoriated Jeremy Corbyn on his departure from the Labour Party, deservedly so. But John Mann has been chairman of the UK Parliamentarians Against Anti-Semitism. He just resigned from Parliament to become the government's anti-Semitism coordinator for the UK. This guy couldn't possibly be a more genuine friend and a greater advocate for the Jewish people. And between people like that we have in Europe, and then when you look at the administration I'm privileged to work for, whether it's President Trump, or Vice President Pence, or my boss, Secretary Pompeo, and I'm not even talking about the Jews yet. It's just extraordinary how committed this administration is to fighting this fight. And that's a big asset.
Thank you, Elan. So Rabbi Steinmetz, from your vantage point standing right here on the pulpit of this congregation, this beautiful congregation, what worries you about anti-Semitism? How do you see the state of affairs of anti-Semitism?
So, I mean, I'm listening to these wonderful, articulate answers, and what I've been thinking about is a line from Dickens. It was the best of times and it was the worst of times. And certainly Elan talks about contextualizing things. The German-American Bund, which was the center of anti-Semitism here in the 1930s and 1940s, had its headquarters on the next block. I don't know what it was like, Rabbi Lipstadt, having the Bund on the next block, but there were major marches here down 86th Street. And so certainly when you fast forward nearly 80 years, you say the world is different. And you do get the sense that Jews in America are privileged. But at the same time, we've had 2 shootings in synagogues, the worst anti-Semitic events in American history in the past year. At the same time, we have a scourge of anti-Semitism occurring, particularly in Brooklyn, and very often motivated by segments of hate within the black community that may be whipped up by people like Louis Farrakhan. At the same time, you have 40% of European Jews saying they want to leave Europe. So this is the best of times, and it was the worst of times. Because there are so many things that are going wrong. And we're actually wondering what's happening. Because when a trend goes in one direction, and then all of a sudden it reverses course, you begin to question yourself. What happened to this world? Didn't we have faith in progress? Didn't we have faith in democracy? And now things are changing. So it is a very confusing state of affairs. And certainly I understand that. But there's something more to it as well. You know, as a rabbi, I hope you don't mind if I say a short Torah. I agree with the Rabbi Abadi.
What a rabbi is good for, right?
And this week's Parsha talks about remembering what Amalek did. And, you know, Elan was talking about anti-Semitism from the perspective of America. Because as Americans, anti-Semitism indicates a disease within democracy. It indicates that there's something wrong with civil society. But for Jews to remember Amalek is to, number one, say, we're never going to be naive again. Number two, to say, we need to be uncompromising. So I very often make the same comparison you do, Elan. You know what? It's much better than it was 80 years ago. But guess what? We need to say that the only amount of anti-Semitism that's acceptable is 0% of anti-Semitism. There is no reason that Jews should have to suffer under this burden. And when after the shooting in Pittsburgh, someone came here and interviewed me and said, well, now you're spending more money on security. I said, do you understand the money we spend on security is essentially a tax levied on the Jewish community by anti-Semites. And that is absolutely unacceptable. Not more than 0% anti-Semitism is acceptable, and that's the lesson of Amalek. Be uncompromising about it. So what is the state of affairs? It's very good, but there are things that make us nervous, but very good isn't good enough.
Thank you, Rabbi Steinmetz. Of course, anti-Semitism should have 0 tolerance whatsoever. There's no reason at all that we should tolerate a bit, or a little bit, or less, or more. It has to be 0. No other people, I think, in the world, no other minority suffer such a way as the Jews are, such animosity. There is some discrimination, correct, but there's no such thing as anti-Semitism against anti-other. Thank you very much. I just want to take a minute to recognize and acknowledge the presence of Rabbi and Mrs. Haskell-Luxstein. We need no introduction. Rabbi Emeritus of this congregation for over 50 years and also of Ramaz. Thank you very much for joining us. So, Stephen Savitsky, as the head of Bnai Zion and the former president of the OU, the Union of Orthodox Jewish Congregation, as a layperson and as a leader of a Jewish organization, how do you see the state of affairs of anti-Semitism? today?
Well, you know, I think the biggest problem that I see is complacency. People are talking about, well, you know, it is the best of times, as the rabbi spoke about in a way, but the best of times could quickly become the worst of times. And when people start to say, it can't happen, it could never happen, that's when we run into problems. Because it can happen, and it will happen unless we do something about it. So as someone who's a communal leader and been involved for many years in the Jewish community, this is a fight that we cannot lose. This is not another venture we're going into. This is not another project that we're looking into. This is literally the fight for our generation, for our children and our grandchildren. And we can't fail. Unfortunately, I know when Rebecca started, she said, you know, this is something we have to defeat. We are not going to defeat anti-Semitism. What we can do, hopefully, is control it. It has been around for thousands of years, from the time of Esav and Yaakov, and it will be around long after. But Rabbi Abadi is also a doctor. Sometimes you have an infection. You have to learn to control that infection. Unless, if you don't do that, it will spread and can become lethal. What we have to do is make sure we stop it, because we cannot allow this to become a cultural thing where it's easy enough for a political leader to get up and say anything they want and no one else will respond. We have a very strong obligation. As a community leader, as a community member, I can tell you through the Conference of Presidents of major Jewish organizations, I'm sure all of you know that organization. Elan has just come to our conference that we had, and you notice, of course, that it's the Conference of Presidents of major Jewish organizations, because there are no minor Jewish organizations. And that probably is one of our biggest challenges that we're going to face. How do we become all minor players in a very major battle? Because we've got to check our egos at the door. We can't worry about who's first and who's second, who's got their name on the top billing. We have to work on it as a coordinated effort. And if we do that, there's no question we will check it, we will keep it intact, and we will provide a lifestyle for our children and our grandchildren that they deserve. And that's what I think about all the time. And how do we do this? I hope we have the strength and the courage and the wisdom to do this. We're smart people. We can do it if we want.
Thank you, Stephen. So we're going to move now to our second question, 2 minutes each panelist. We'll try to keep that time. Elan, I'm going to ask you, as a Sephardic Middle Eastern Jew, parents and grandparents who lived in Arab countries amongst the Arab population, you had mentioned when you assumed your position that you will be monitoring and combating anti-Semitism also in Arab countries and not as usual only in European countries. So we know that many of those Arab countries finance courses in major universities, Ivy League universities here in the United States, courses that are anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, and some of them bordering on anti-Semitism. So how can we combat that, and what have you been doing so far in that area?
Yeah, so actually this is very exciting because you're right, I said that from day one, and that's for two reasons. First of all, I think my background as an Iraqi Jew makes me especially suited to try to move the needle on this in the Arab world. But second of all, the situation is dramatically different today because of the Iranian threat and geopolitical realignments in the region. I think the Arab world is more receptive to being approached in a serious and candid way on this issue than perhaps ever before. I'm excited to announce, it hasn't been announced publicly yet, but I can tell you I'll be going very shortly to the Gulf. There are already plans, there's a date where I'll be going to the Gulf to engage specifically on this issue. And I think that, again, you know, when you have countries allied with the United States, I'm not talking about Iran now, you have countries allied with the United States whose textbooks are like out of Germany in the 1930s. That's unacceptable. First of all, it's child abuse to do that to their children. To inculcate Jew hatred in children is child abuse on a mass scale, number one. But second of all, it becomes so difficult to undo the damage. So investing in that, in preventing the inculcation of Jew hatred in young people, is one of my top priorities. Deborah mentioned that even in non-radical Islamic Arab populations, Muslim populations in Europe, it's a source of anti-Semitism and violence against Jews. Why is that? Well, because when they're raised with fed a constant diet of Jew hatred from the moment they can walk, it becomes very difficult to change that. Now, it's not impossible to change, very difficult to change. So this is a top priority. I think there is movement on this, and I'm very excited that we can make potentially real gains here. I want to say also something else. We don't rank kinds of anti-Semitism in terms of importance or severity. We don't ignore any of the sources, whether it's the radical right, the radical left, or militant Islam. I think we have to strike a unifying voice here and to say, look, the weaponization of anti-Semitism for political gain hurts the fight for all of us. And so, whether it's Jew hatred from the right or from the left, Jew hatred is Jew hatred. And it's bad, and it's evil, and it's despicable, and we have to confront it. And so I think that message, if we can stick to that message, is, in our hyper-partisan environment today, really a kind of a unifying way to bring everyone together in confronting this as a...
I just want to echo what Elan is saying, because I've spent, the book came out in February, it's in its 5th printing, and I've been on the road consistently. And invariably, when I'm talking to Jewish audiences, and I was telling you earlier, and more I'm talking to non-Jewish audiences, which showing how they take this seriously. But very often in Jewish audiences, or just at the Shabbos lunch table, if you talk about anti-Semitism on the left, the people will say, well, what about the right? And if you talk about it on the right, they say, well, it's worse on the left. That's weaponizing anti-Semitism. When someone does that, then my thought is that they're less concerned about the anti-Semitism, and they're more concerned about scoring political points. The point is, using anti-Semitism as a political cudgel, to beat up the opposite side, means you don't really care about it as an issue. The issue is the issue. And the fact is, for those of us on the right, those of us on the left, the place where you have more, as the students would say, street credibility, is with the people with whom you share your other views, not with the people across the transom. So that's where you really should be addressing it, and not simply all of us getting defensive and saying, well, it's worse over there.
Yeah, if I can also...
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question. And then
I want to hop in on her.
Yes,
Okay, fine.
I'm going to ask you right now a question, and you can include that in the answer if you don't mind, Rabbi Stein. So, of course, that even for generations, the Jews have been accused of being communists, the Jews have been accused of being very capitalist, the Jews have been accused of every other extreme by the other extreme, the other side. And that's correct. It's definitely political candidates have to be very, very careful not to score political gain by using anti-Semitism. So, Rabbi Steinmetz, we have been witnessing and reading about attacks on individual Jews in Crown Heights, Borough Park, all over France, certainly. And mostly those attacks are by individuals, either representing an ideology or not. In France, it's mostly Muslims, anti-Jews. Here is mostly minorities also, these individual attacks. So as a religious leader, what would you advise your congregation to do in situations like this? We all heard the German minister advised to not to wear a kippah, then he reversed himself. What goes through your mind, and how would you deal with that issue?
That's an excellent question. I mean, I think, and I'm going to give 2 answers, and the first so I can get back to what Deborah said. But I think, first of all, what is incumbent upon us as a community is to preserve our unity. And what Deborah was saying about how people politicize anti-Semitism, and they actually go on political fishing trips to find what may sound anti-Semitic on someone on the other side and then tar them with it. That's American politics. But when you come to look within our community, and I'm speaking as a rabbi, it is of great concern that when we're under threat, instead of coming together, we're fighting with each other. And I need to tell you, someone who I respect greatly sent me a note after the Pittsburgh shooting and said, but you know, anti-Semitism of the left, of BDS, is far worse. And my response was, please don't talk to me. I cannot imagine with 11 families sitting Shiva, you're sitting and deciding which type of political anti-Semitism is worse. Now, that's just an indication of what is going on in our community. We are allowing ourselves to be divided. We're saying, I'm allowing my political identity to take primacy over my Jewish identity. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. Our Jewish identity nourishes who we are. It gives us a spiritual and existential essence. And politics is politics. Some of us may have a high opinion of politics and politicians. I do not. But it certainly shouldn't be primary over our Jewish identity. We as a community need to come together rather than split apart in the face of anti-Semitism. But here comes the question about Crown Heights. Our friends in Crown Heights have been facing a series of attacks. I asked a friend of mine beforehand to send me a list of attacks in the last year plus. There have been 25 attacks, nearly 20 of them have been violent. And here you have a Hasidic community facing attacks. And one of the things he wrote me is he said, we feel invisible because we're Hasidic. And the question is, how many of us are turning to the Jews of Midwood and Crown Heights and saying, you're one of us? Now, in an Orthodox community, that's easy. I'm turning to people I know very well, and I'm saying, tell me what you're doing. Tell me how I can support you. Tell me when you're having a rally. I think they're thinking of a rally on the 25th of September. Tell me what I can do. But this is something the entire Jewish community needs to be a part of. Now, I was at a rally against anti-Semitism recently here on the East Side, which was convened by our member of Congress, because there was an anti-Semitic graffiti at Asphalt Green. And I didn't carefully read the speakers list, and when I got to the rally, I found out that Al Sharpton was speaking. And I initially thought I was going to walk away, and then I decided to stay because I was going to say something about the Jews of Crown Heights, and say how that when we speak about anti-Semitism, we speak about the Jews of Crown Heights as well. But I needed to know that there are Jewish organizations that are willing to accept him in, even though he has not in any way properly apologized to the Jews of Crown Heights. And we need to say that we are there for the Jews of Crown Heights. We're not going to turn our backs on them, and we need to be there for each other. It doesn't matter if you're Reform or conservative or Orthodox, we need to be there for each other.
Can I jump in on that? Sure. I cannot emphasize enough how important our message is. Jewish disunity is disastrous. If you look at the response of the British Jews to what's going on in England, they had the three competing newspapers in London, three competing Jewish newspapers printed a joint editorial, United We Stand, on the front page. They had a rally where the rally was entitled Enough is Enough. And they said, we won't stand for this. You are seeing now a civil war, an open civil war in the Labour Party over anti-Semitism. You're seeing the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the outgoing Prime Minister Theresa May and Boris Johnson, talk about this publicly, how anti-Semitism is vile and cannot ever be allowed to exist in the United Kingdom. Now think about this. Think about the effect of Jewish unity. I don't think this would have happened had the Jewish community not stood up and said, literally, as they said, enough is enough. We need to do that here. The Jewish community has to unite and say, look, whatever our disagreements, we can disagree on a lot of things. Certainly about partisan politics and everything else. But when it comes to our safety, when it comes to the safety of our children, there can be no disagreement. We have to stand one voice united to fight anti-Semitism in all its forms, wherever it comes from. And to do it as one people with one voice.
Thank you very much. Mr. Young, let me ask you the next question. Do you mind?
I just wanted to comment on something Elan said, because I think it's important that so many times people think that in order to have unity, we have to have uniformity, which we don't have to have. Unity is not uniformity. But I think people sometimes think it's up to the big organizations to get together and we're going to be the ones that are going to solve these problems. I think we're trying. I think through the Conference of Presidents, I see for the first time, we're all working on this very seriously. But I think it's up to individuals. You know, when the rabbi talks about it, and Elan talks about it, we have to have unity. That means individual people. You know, it's not the person next to you. You know, there's always stories when the rabbi gives up and gives a great speech and the person says, he's talking to the person next to me, he's not talking to me. We're talking to him. We're talking to every single person sitting in this audience. As Rabbi Steinmetz said, when you hear there's an incident, why not go? Help out. Call up somebody you know. See what you could do as an individual. Don't wait for the organization to make the move. Because if you do, it may happen, it may not happen. I have a lot more faith in individuals. Some of the greatest things that I've ever seen happen to the Jewish people have happened because of individual people. I was in Chicago several months ago, and they had a unity Shabbos where they all got together, and it was people were talking about it, and it was wonderful. And I started asking people, who organized it? Was it Bnai B'rith? Was it Hillel? Was it AIPAC? Was it, who was it? It was two people. Two regular people who got together and said, we've got to do something. I think that's the most important message. You can do it yourself. Don't wait for the Union Orthodox congregation, the Reform congregations, or AIPAC or anybody. Don't wait for anyone. Do it yourself, because the issue is so important. That's how we get unity.
I'm going to jump in here making the rabbi a little bit crazy because I know he's trying to get on. But I think there's another thing, and I agree with everything that's been said, but there's another thing as well. And sometimes this may be hard to hear, but we can't fight one ism to the exclusion of other isms. We can't fight anti-Semitism and abide racism. Even if we're angry about certain things that have happened in certain neighborhoods, we can't do it on moral grounds, and we can't do it on strategic grounds. We need other groups beside us as we make this fight, and also, it's because it's in our Jewish DNA, if you will, that we shouldn't abide. You know, what did we just read? Tzedek, tzedek, tirdof. You know, it says it twice, justice, justice shall you pursue. It's not just for us, but it's for others as well. And our voices ring hollow if we're not making this fight across the board. And I think that's very important, and it's hard to do. It's hard to do when you see things like in Brooklyn. It's hard to do when you hear Minister Farrakhan and the things he said. But if you're going to draw with a broad brush, then others can draw with a broad brush against us. And I think that that's exceptionally important.
Stephen, I'm going to ask you a sticky question, but you are the lay leader. Right? No, but the lay leader, you're a Jewish leader, an important Jewish leader, and so therefore, this is the question. An article in the American Thinker on September 6th, titled, "American Jews Are in Total Denial About the Democratic Party," by Ron Jager, states that progressive Jews are saying, don't criticize Tlaib and Omar, or we lose credibility. Is that an admission of weakness and defeat? Yes. What should then be the communal response by these politicians, the like of Tlaib, Omar, Ocasio-Cortez, and Presley? How should we respond? Should it be politically correct, or we should be, as a minority, speak loudly and clear against that?
We have to tell the truth. You know, I remember one time going to a meeting with Bibi Netanyahu, and one of the students at NYU got up and asked a question about, what am I supposed to say on the college campus? I'm not really sure. And he said, just tell the truth. Just tell the truth. What we have is the MS. That's what it is. Let's tell the truth. If these people are anti-Semitic, and they are, let's speak about it. Let's talk about it. We have nothing to be ashamed of. We have everything to be proud of. I think we should never take a position that was politically correct. This battle is too important, and we are too important, and we've done a great job in America. We've contributed to American society. We've done more than probably any other group proportionally who we are. I think we have to speak up, and we have to be very vociferous and very articulate about it. I think every organization has to do that, and I think organizations that try to think about what's politically correct are doing a disservice to the constituent base.
Yeah, I want to tell you, the most disturbing meeting I had in the last 6 months being on this job, which says a lot, is a meeting I had with a UK Labour MP who walked out of the Labour Party because this MP said, I won't sit at the same table with anti-Semites. This MP said to me in a meeting, this disaster we have in England all started on the campuses. And we did nothing because they were only students. And then it moved into the Labour Party. But we did nothing because it was just the far left fringe. And now they won and we lost, and I no longer have a political party that I can call home. I'll tell you, my hair stood on end. And the reason why my hair stood on end is because I've been dealing, way before this role, I've been dealing with what's going on college campuses in the US for 25 years. I was the president, international president of API. I've done 180 campuses around the world. And what is going on many of them, not all of them, but on many of them, is absolutely disgraceful. It is a 24/7 indoctrination against the Jewish people in the state of Israel. A kid gave me a answer sheet to his math class, and I have the copy still. It says the derivative of so-and-so is such and such, the integral of such and such and so, and then it says, another day in the occupied Palestinian territory, Zionist forces murdering children. Then it goes back to math. The kid who gave this to me says, with exhaustion, said to me, in math class, I can't even escape this? It is a constant drumbeat. And that's why surveys are showing today that Jewish students, this is a recent survey that was done, Jewish students on college campuses in the US today are less supportive of Israel than ever before, more inclined to side with Israel's enemies than ever before. And the crisis in the Christian evangelical community today, and I know I attend these conferences, the crisis is that we're losing our kids on Israel. One pastor said to me, we raise our children to be pro-Israel as a matter of theological faith. And we send them away to college and they come back and they're turned. Kid said to me at a rally, I was at a rally for Israel, evangelical kid ran up to me and says, I'm here, I'm volunteering, I love Israel. I said, tell me something, is it true that young evangelicals are less supportive of Israel? He says, it's absolutely true, it's all around us. I said, why is that, man? You know what he said to me? He said, because we also go to college. We also hear it all the time. Let me tell you, when that MP said to me, it all started on the campuses, we did nothing. We have got to deal with this today. And one of the most exciting things we're working on in the administration is an interagency process on anti-Semitism, a formalized interagency process that's going to bring together us in state, the Department of Education, Treasury, and Justice. And you think of that, Department of Justice, Treasury, Education, and say all of the players that can bring real force to this fight are now at the table to deal with this issue like it needs to be dealt with. I'm very excited about what's going to come.
Very true. So we're all in agreement that we really should condemn anti-Semitism either from the right or from the left or from the center or from whoever. That's something that is so obvious. But there are very few major Jewish organizations. As Stephen said, there are no minor Jewish organizations. I was invited to a briefing by AJC showing a study by the ADL. Most of the emphasis on anti-Semitism was on white supremacists. It's as though they skip over the anti-Semitism coming from the left, like from Antifa, from Black Lives Matter, from Women's March, intersectionality, and things like that. So what can be done to bring
first
that
of all,
emphasis?
that's not been my reality, and that's the world. And that's the world I live in 24/7, at least the past 8 months, and certainly years before that. I see it condemned on both sides. I see it condemned on both sides by people on the other side. But there certainly is, in fact, to some degree, BDS is, first of all, not about B, D, or S. It's about the toxification of Israel, making Israel toxic. But sometimes we also give it ammunition, airtime, that it doesn't deserve. We build it up in a way that it doesn't deserve to be built up. It's often McCarthyism of the left. But at the same time, let me say something else, because if you're going to address the students, There are students who have affiliated with BDS. I'm not here to make you feel good. I'm here to speak what I think is the truth. There are students who are affiliated with BDS who are not anti-Semites. The founders of BDS, the creators of BDS, you look at their founding papers, there's no question that they are out for the destruction of the state of Israel, which to my mind is anti-Semitism. There's no question about it. But there are students who have become affiliated with BDS. I think it's a mistake, of course, as I think everybody in this room does, but because they think it's a way of solving a human rights problem, just like their parents were involved in the fight against apartheid. To say to them, you're an anti-Semite, so does not comport with their reality. That first of all, they're going to look at you and think, you're nuts, and that when you say you're an anti-Semite to someone who's really an anti-Semite, they're not going to believe you. When I say to someone, you're an anti-Semite, and I've had a chance to say it, or say about someone, you're an anti-Semite, that is one of the worst things I can say about them. I don't use the accusation glibly. I don't make the accusation glibly. So to say it to a student, even if you think the student is totally wrong, is not only mistaken, but it's counterproductive. You'll never get them back. You may disagree with J Street 120%, but there are many students who are part of J Street. I know this is going to be hard for some of you to fathom, who are supporters of Israel, love Israel, think they're doing the best thing for Israel. We disagree with them. Most of us in this room, I think, disagree with them. But to label J Street as an anti-Semitic organization, as was done at a Jewish meeting of college students, is counterproductive. Those kids won't come back. This is a war. We're fighting it strategically. It's not to win points, to go home and say, I told them. You told them, but you didn't accomplish a damn thing. If I can say that in this room, sorry. I did already. Oh, well, see? Because we've got to fight it strategically.
Deborah, I want to say something. First of all, I agree. It's absolutely factually correct that not every kid who's drawn into this is an anti-Semite. But to say that is and I know you're not intending to minimize danger. I know, but I just want to make sure that we don't minimize it. My mother at one point traveled around the United States many years ago before there was internet, and she encountered people in rural America who literally believed that Jews had horns. And they were not anti-Semites. They were actually pleasantly surprised to learn from my mother that we don't. Are those anti-Semites? No, but the movement that preaches.
Yes, absolutely.
So just because there are people who subscribe to this, who've been caught up in the blood libels leveled against the state of Israel, we must understand what this is. This is really about destroying Israel, and it's very important to say.
Right, what I'm talking about is how you get it back.
And how you get it back, and that's what I was going to say. The second part is, strategically, you say you don't want to call these kids anti-Semites. I want you to know, as a matter of operating principles in my work, I don't call anybody anti-Semite. By the way, you know who knows what's in a person's heart? God knows what's in a person's heart.
And the cardiologist.
Yeah, maybe, if they have a good one.
Right.
I certainly don't know what's in their heart. I don't use the term. I talk about anti-Semitism, and I talk about what they do and what they say. And I label what they do and what they say as anti-Semitic. Not who they are. That I don't know. And so I think we have to be very clear in focusing. By the way, there's an accepted definition. We didn't talk about the standard accepted definition of anti-Semitism that many countries have adopted, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. It's very important. And it gives a list of examples, including some of the anti-Israel stuff, as anti-Semitism. And so it's very helpful to say, look, I'm not attacking you, but you should know what you're saying is anti-Semitic, and here's why. And that's sort of my...
I just want to jump in. I want to go back to your point about calling J Street anti-Semitic, which you said it's counterproductive. It's not counterproductive. It's wrong. And that needs to be said here, and I am as far away from J Street as anyone can be in terms of their Israeli politics. But it is so incredibly wrong. It's what I've been saying from the beginning tonight. If we're going to start fighting with each other and calling each other anti-Semites, we have no chance whatsoever. You could be vehemently against J Street's politics, but guess what? They're not anti-Semites, and they come to support Israel in their way. And we have to stop doing this sort of divisive vision of the way the Jews work. We are not here to fight with other Jews. We are here to fight with anti-Semites. And if we fight with other Jews, we're doing their work. So I needed to come back to that, but I wanted to just say one other quick thing when it comes to anti-Zionism. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. It's very simple, because if the anti-Zionist vision ever comes true, 7.5 million Jews will unfortunately be either oppressed or worse. So there's no question anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. It is an attempt to undermine one of the bases of the Jewish religion, which is also part of what anti-Semitism is. It's not just about the elimination of Jews, but it's also about the elimination of the Jewish religion. But when it comes to arguing it, and here comes to your point of counterproductive, if you're trying to argue with someone who's anti-Zionist and you say, well, you're an anti-Semite, you've let them win the debate. You need to talk about why Zionism is right. Zionism is right because the Jews are the Aboriginal people of Israel, and they have been living in that land longer than virtually any other nation has been living in their land. Zionism is right because it is recognized by international law. Zionism is right because Israel is a democracy in a sea of totalitarianism. And Zionism is right because her enemies, and you can very often judge a country by its enemies, are radicals, anti-democratic, authoritarians that not only try to kill Israelis and Jews, but kill many of their own as well. That's why Zionism is right. So you don't need to go to someone and say you're anti-Zionist, or you're an anti-Semite, end of argument, because you haven't won the argument. You need to talk about why we are Zionists. And it's an easy argument. Make the argument for Israel. Don't try to disqualify your opponent.
Well said.
Thank you. We now approaching our third part of the panel. We're going to be reading some questions from the public, but let me just introduce this section by saying that today Andrew Boston tweeted. He's the author of The Legacy of Jihad, The Legacy of Islamic Anti-Semitism, Sharia versus Freedom. So he tweeted today that the Islamic Society of North America Conference featured Bernie Sanders, and Linda Sarsour, promoted mainstream Islamic Al-Azhar endorsed manual on Islamic law, which admonishes Muslims to wage jihad on Jews and Christians. So moving into Islamic anti-Semitism, the ADL study, survey of 55,000 people, shows, and these are the results of that study according to this question, that based on agreement with 6 of all anti-Semitic statements, Muslims in Western Europe exhibit 49 to 68% rates of extreme anti-Semitism versus 12 to 19% amongst other population. Or 2 to 4.5 times greater percentages of anti-Semitism than non-Muslims in those individual countries. Another result was that extreme anti-Semitism among Muslims measures 49% versus 24% for Christians and 21% for atheists and so on. And also that the most anti-Semitic countries with rates of 74 to 93% are all in the Muslim countries in the Middle East. And the last one is that 34% of US Muslims show extreme anti-Semitism versus 14% of the general population, which is 2.4 times more than the average in the United States. So the question is, I know most of our history we dealt with Christian anti-Semitism in Europe and South America. Now we are in an era in which Islam is very important and there is a lot of Islamic anti-Semitism. So I'm going to start with you, Elan, if you don't mind. What are we going to be doing and how are we going to thwart that threat?
So, first of all, there's no question that that's the case. Virtually all of the violence against Jews in Western Europe has been from the Arab and Muslim population in Western Europe. Virtually all. So we cannot ignore that fact. We can't downplay that fact. That is, we're stuck with it, and that is something that we have to acknowledge. So how do you solve the problem? So you solve the problem two ways. You solve the problem where the violence is occurring, but then you also have to go to the source. Where the problem is occurring is in Europe. I regularly, in my diplomatic asks in Western Europe, is first of all to provide security. So Jewish facilities have to be protected. Jews have to be protected. If you don't have safety, there is no quality of life. So safety is job one for any government, by the way. That's sovereignty obligates the provision of safety to the populace. So security has to be provided to Jewish facilities, number one. Number two, there has to be a focused campaign aimed at Arab and Muslim populations in these countries. A focused campaign that not only educates about anti-Semitism and the dangers of anti-Semitism, but also educates in philo-Semitism. And this is something that's often neglected generally. When you talk about fighting anti-Semitism, everyone talks about Holocaust education, which, by the way, is sorely needed. Surveys now show that fewer and fewer kids have heard of the Holocaust in the United States and even in Europe, which is disgraceful. So yes, Holocaust education is very important because people have to know the destructive power of this ancient human sickness, this relentless pathology that is anti-Semitism. But it's not sufficient. We have to educate in what Jewish contributions to our countries, to the United States and others, have been, and how integral and how basic Jewish involvement is. This is critically important. There's a campaign now in Poland to really talk about how Jews were so integral in Polish life before Poland became.
There's also a law in Poland that denies the Holocaust. So let's.
No, you're talking about the IPN.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. The IPN law says that it's illegal to blame the Polish government or the Polish nation.
It does says the Polish nation, the Polish people, for collaboration, and we know damn well, using it again, it really makes me angry that more.
Believe me, I deal with the IPN issue. I promise you, I deal with this issue. But let's make sure we understand what the law says, which is you can't blame the Polish nation, the Polish government. But you're right. I agree. Believe me, I'm on the record about this law, so I'm not defending it. So Poland has a focused campaign to educate in philo-Semitism. Other countries are doing that as well. That has to be done in a focused way aimed at Muslim and Arab populations. But then I said you have to go to the source. This is why I talked before about how important it is we move the needle on anti-Semitism in the Arab world, in the Muslim world. Because what happens in the Arab world, in the Middle East, doesn't stay in the Middle East. What happens in the Middle East affects the European street and affects the US college campus. And so if we can go to the source and move the needle on anti-Semitism, the funding of Near East Studies departments, the scholarships and the all expense paid, where Arab students are being sent into Western European universities, into the United States, into US universities. If these countries can actually change how they speak about Jews and re-educate their populations, you'll see a dramatic change when these populations arrive in the countries to which they immigrate. And that's key. But this is a long-term, this will require a lot of effort over years.
Correct. There has been some very minor change in those Arab countries, mainly Saudi Arabia, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, and we hope and pray that there will be much more than that. Rabbi Steinmetz, ecumenical and interfaith dialogue and work has become a fad, a fashion. Almost every other rabbi is involved. I am personally involved. So how do you think if we could use those dialogues to basically treat this Islamic or Muslim anti-Semitism?
I mean, I think that all anti-Semitism, the dialogue is valuable. First of all, dialogue is always valuable in and of itself. Certainly, we do need to reach out to the Muslim community. We need to reach out to the Black community, speaking about the fact we are always better off talking to responsible people who will be, as Deborah put it, allies, and that if we stand up for them, they will stand up for us. So let me give you an example. After the attack in New Zealand, we took a group of students from Ramaz to visit the Islamic school, which is here on 96th Street. I can tell you, they were so happy and so delighted. We didn't bring any press. We didn't do any major publicity about it. You know, they weren't interested. We weren't going to do anything. But they were so delighted just to have our students meet their students. We brought them, it was actually around Purim, we brought them Hamantashen. And it makes an impact. Ultimately, when you're going to build bridges, you're going to build it between people. You're not going to build it between concepts. You're not going to build it between theologians. You're going to be building it between communities and people. And when people meet each other and know each other, their views are changed.
It's much harder to demonize a group when you know people in that group. You can still say, some of my best friends are Jews, some of my best friends are whatever, but it becomes much harder.
Some of my best friends are Jews.
Yeah, some of my worst enemies are Jews. So. My father used to say, once I said to him, someone said to my father, some of my best friends are Jews. I said, isn't that nice, Daddy, that you said that? He said, when you hear someone say, some of my best friends are white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, then it'll be nice, you know?
I had the privilege, like over a month ago, I was invited by Mohammed Al-Isa, who is the Secretary General of the Muslim World League, to a national conference on peace, harmony, and tolerance in Sri Lanka. I was representing the Jewish religion or the Jewish community amongst the Buddhists, Hindus, Catholic, representative from the Vatican, and the Muslim community there. Of course, it was a conference in which Sri Lanka, after the terrorist attacks in around April, was fragmenting to their religious grouping, and this conference was supposed to unite them back together. I have to say, it was the only place that I felt that nothing was spoken against the Jews, or for the Jews either. So I was kind of an anonymous, so to speak, even though I was there present. But it's good to see that definitely ecumenical work, interfaith work is very important with all the religions possible, because that would be understanding, and once there is understanding, there is respect. And there is
and I would say it's not the formal rabbi to imam, it's very often just person
people
to
to
person.
people.
That's right.
Letting people know, getting to know people, connecting to people, that makes a big difference.
The last question, even though it's for Elan Carr, I'm going to also have maybe Deborah speak about. Regarding, this is from the audience, the Jewish Voice for Peace, which states on its website that they are anti-Zionists and support the Arab concept of the Nakba. This group is currently metastasizing across American college campuses. They threaten pro-Israel college students. What can you do to stop them, or what can be done to stop them?
Yeah, so it's interesting that this question came because I was about to actually follow up on what you were saying about J Street. J Street is not anti-Semitic, okay? But there are Jewish anti-Semites, and we, just like we don't want to gratuitously fight with each other, we also have to be very clear that, you know, Jews love talking about the big tent, but not everyone is in the tent. And if somebody is going to declare war on the Jewish people, I have to tell you the amount of damage that Jews are doing, Jews who are leading anti-Semitic movements are doing to us. I deal with this all the time in my work. It is staggering. A plank was introduced for the Democratic Party of California, which, by the way, let me say, was rejected. But it was introduced that says Israel is responsible for anti-Semitism because it's a white racist country. That was introduced by a Jewish lawyer. The BDS vote that passed the academic senate at Claremont McKenna colleges, that was vetoed by the non-Jewish president, thank God, was introduced by a Jewish professor. The induction of Mariano Rivera into the Hall of Fame was protested by a Jewish activist because he's a pro-Israel fanatic, it was said about Mariano Rivera. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, which was voted, the adoption of which was voted by the OSCE, 57 countries. The vote was 56-1, not controversial, 56-1. The IRA definition of anti-Semitism was defeated in the Stanford University Student Senate by JVP, by Jews who said, we don't support this, We are the problem. We're not the solution. We should not, we are the problem. We represent white privilege, and we stand against this definition of anti-Semitism. This is going on everywhere, and we have to know that there is a line, and if you cross the line, you have to say, look, this is just not acceptable conduct. Certain people are outside of the tent. And so part of it is we're reticent about branding anyone as outside, as saying that anything is unacceptable when it's in the Jewish community. But we've got to be able to say it. You know, I used to be a prosecutor before this job, and you know, I say it this way, I prosecuted for a time child molesters. You know, child molesters don't get invited to dinner. They don't get to go to synagogue, they don't get business deals, and they don't have clients. Because nobody wants to be associated with them. Why is it that you can have a Jew make it his or her life's work to destroy the Jewish people? And there are no consequences. There's no opprobrium, there's no excommunication, nobody complains about it. There has to be enough is enough. But it's very important that you draw the line in the right place.
Right, exactly.
You got to draw the line in the right
That's
place.
exactly right. No, I think that both, I agree with both,
Yeah.
both ways, the point you were making, the point you were making. It's hard. It's hard to say that someone has a position with which I virtually disagree, but it's a position, and that doesn't make them an anti-Semite. I think it's very, very important. And it's easy to say, and too often I heard it, and I hear it all the time, J Street, those people, anti-Semitic. Not so. But we saw this in the Labor Party. What happened when there's been a Jewish labor, what's the official group that's existed for years, members of the Labor Party, a Jewish group, and long associated. Well, when they began to break away because of Jeremy Corbyn and those around him and their anti-Semitism, what did Corbyn do? He found a group of Jews who were much more malleable, and he created this phony group. I mean, it is a group, and they are Jews, there's no question about it. But they are his supporters, they're his cover, they're his shills in that way. But we have to differentiate. Listen, the time, we're almost finished, but if I can say anything, this is a battle. It's not our entire existence, as the rabbi said before, this rabbi, not that one. The best of times, the worst of times, there is much to celebrate. Look, you're sitting in this terrific synagogue, the school across the street, and the other schools, and there's a lot going on that is good. You know, and someone once asked me, I recently was speaking in England at Hay-on-Wye, the biggest literary festival in the world, 400 people, very few Jews in the audience. And the person who was interviewing me, an editor from a British daily, not Jew, said to me, Deborah, I read your book, and you seem to somewhat be optimistic. And I said, you know, the definition of a Jewish optimist is someone who thinks things can't get any worse. A Jewish pessimist thinks they can, and then I add a Jewish realist knows that they are. You know, but I think we have to be careful. And I want to, because I know we're going to wrap up, and maybe with a little anecdote. I belonged to a shul in Atlanta when I quit, and now I've rejoined, which I love very much. And I was walking into that shul with two friends of mine, Rabbi Lipstadt and Audrey know the family well. And I was walking with mother and a little girl then, she was about 4.5, 5. And as we walked in, there was a police officer at the door, and the mother turned to her daughter and said, Shai, say thank you to the police officer for keeping us safe. And little Shai, with whom I read every night when I'm in Atlanta, looked utterly confused. Because for her, the synagogue is a happy place. She comes at 9:30 on the Shabbos morning, her parents go into the sanctuary, she peels off to the playground, she runs around like a maniac, she's in the playground. At some point they go into children's services, which at that age are songs and games and snacks. And then when they finish, they go into the main sanctuary and the rabbi gives them lollipops, you know, more sugar, and then they go into the Kiddush, and usually if you go into the Kiddush with a 4 or 5-year-old, and there are 200 people milling about, you say, now stay in my eyesight. You don't have to stay right next to me, but you can only go, you know, Dalet Amot, 4 cubits one way or the other. But in this place, we all know each other. The kids take their plates, they load them up with food, with cookies, with crackers, with olives, with a cake. Nothing protein, nothing protein.
Getting hungry.
You know, and then they go home. And she's had a great 3 hours. And here's her mother telling her, say thank you to the officer for keeping us safe. And let me fast forward. 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I was walking into shul with her again because they're my neighbors, so she saw me walking, she ran to catch up with me. I was going to get there ahead of her parents. And as we passed the police officer, I said, Shai, there's the police officer. And with no prompting, she's now about 6½, she said, thank you for taking care of us. She had learned. Now she looks at the big church across the street. There are no police officers there. The doors are wide open, people walk in, they're welcomed. We welcome people too, but we look them over before we welcome to make sure they're friendly types. The challenge to us is for those little shies in this shul and in so many other synagogues to find the balance between Jewish object, what is done to Jews, and Jewish subject, what Jews do. And to understand that we treasure that, af al pi, despite this Jew hatred, this virulent hatred, the oldest hatred, we fight it. But what's much more important is what we do religiously, culturally, communally, philanthropically, socially. We have such a great heritage. You know, it's really, and to let the hatred become the defining factor would be really to give the anti-Semites.
Thank you very much. Maybe a concluding remark from Stephen Savitsky.
It's very difficult. It's not difficult. It's impossible to finish after Deborah. I believe everything you said. I think you said it so eloquently, and I'm actually going to read your book now. I wasn't so sure, but I'm definitely going to read the book. So I just want to thank all of you for coming tonight as president of Bnai Zion, and thank our unbelievable panel, and Elan, atzlacha to you, because your job is so important for all of us. And I'm so thrilled because I knew you from all the years of the conference. I know you're going to do a great job. So thank you so much, and good night. And so much
So, thank you very much, our dear panelists. Let me just say that I will be a realist or an optimist. Probably we'll be meeting again in a year or 10 years from now, and still talking about it. But as a rabbi, I hope and pray that by then the ultimate redemption will be here. Thank you very much. Good night.